It's also extremely difficult politically and legally. And it's especially difficult in Mexico with the amparos. And, you know, we've talked now, I have been talking about amparos with Carlos 20 years. A long time. And we have to live with it. That's the world in which you live in. It's not going to be changed in any dramatic way, I don't think. So, given that's the case, the right way to think about these regulatory details is transitions to a world in which you are altering the business incentives of carriers so that 5 to 10 years from now you don't have to regulate them. And that's by, number one, aligning their incentives with what's in the interest of their customers more than it is now, and making certain that the world is competitive, which can easily be done if all of the major carriers actually have national networks and they don't have termination monopolies. That's all you need to do, is get a transition set of rules right where the things where people have residual market power have price caps on them. So there is not a slowing of growth arising from the vestiges of market power that remain, and work towards a system in which the incentives are properly aligned. And that means going towards a bill and keep system. Going towards a system in which you have regulated your way out of having monopolies you have to regulate. That is the right business strategy for the government, the institutional strategy. It also means one of the ancillary benefits of this is that it creates a huge enhanced incentive for private investment in the sector. Because if the private sector sees that the world is going to be reasonably competitive, and there are not going to be impediments to entry arising from fighting regulatory battles which may be lost, but instead the world is simply going to be one in which if you have a really good idea for a new service, there's not going to be a problem, because you're easily going to be accessible to everyone at a reasonable price. At that point, the Mexican versions of Sergey Brin and Larry Page, who founded Google, are going to found their firms like Google. One of the interesting features, I've seen the argument made that, well, you know, the problem is there isn't a whole lot of content and service out there that is Mexican. That, you know, if we, a huge impediment to the development of the new telecommunications world is the absence of all this content out there. But that gets cause and effect reverse. The reason there isn't as much content out there as you would like is because of the uncertainties of investing in it to begin with, arising from the limitations, the weaknesses of the governance institutions in telecommunications. Well, priority number 3, reorient the way you think about regulation to being one in which the regulator is trying to put himself out of business because he has done such a good job of realigning the incentives of carriers that they become people who think their business model is pleasing their customers rather than pleasing people like Carlos. All right? That is a really important mindset change. That your job is to create a competitive carrier environment so you don't have to worry about it anymore. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people to do, particularly in Latin American countries where there is this long tradition of centralized control of almost everything. But that's the way to go in this industry, because it is one in which there's enormous interactivity across firms. Every innovation by one firm, say a carrier, leads to an innovation by another firm, say a content provider. And that's where the future is. All of the costs and all of the usage are going to be accounted for by things that don't exist yet. All right. Priority number 4, there is an issue about how you get from here to there with regard to broadband access. Now, it's not as big a problem as one might think, because the beauty of wireless technology, unlike wireline, is that it is primarily driven in cost by Moore's Law, which is the founder of Intel, Gordon Moore, has this empirical rule of thumb, which is that it's based on semiconductor technology, which is that the amount of information you can get on a semiconductor doubles every 18 months. Well, another way to say that is the cost of performing a given function in an electronic network falls in half every 18 months. And that's, now we don't see that, of course, in pure cost reduction, because the technology as it advances, as the cost per unit of functionality declines, we use some of that improvement to get better functionality. And that's what wireless is all about. Is getting more and more and more functionality. Just compare a smartphone today with a wireless telephone that had internet access that was available 5 years ago. And the performance differential is enormous. And the cost isn't any greater. We basically have frozen the real cost of wireless access devices and watched their performance roughly double every 18 months. Well, that feeds back into this issue of broadband access. What are the most important barriers to broadband access? Well, we had hoped 20 years ago that we might get there with facilities-based competition in stuff you bury in the ground. That didn't work. It's probably never going to work. And that's why, although the unbundling idea had some merit when it was invented, it really hasn't worked very well as a way. The idea initially was that it combined some of your own facilities and some of the facilities of the incumbent, create a competitive network. And as time progresses and the entry network gets bigger, they can replace more of the stuff they're renting from the incumbent with their own stuff. And then eventually, maybe 5 or 10 years down the road, you've got multiple facilities-based competitors, each one of which started out with some of their own stuff and some of the stuff from the incumbent. If you're an economist or an engineer, you can sit down and write down how you would actually do that and make it work. But the number of regulators that have been able to make it work, you can count on the fingers of one hand. All right? And it really does require a very special kind of incumbent to be able to do that. One that has a very long-term vision of what its optimal future is, not one that is going to fight you tooth and nail and it's going to be a struggle to get them to do unbundling. So, as much as I admire unbundling as a concept, I don't want to rely on it. The future is wireless. That is how we're going to make the telecommunications system competitive. And the way we make the telecommunications system competitive through wireless is have enough spectrum so that you can have 4 or 5 national competing wireless networks capable of 4G or beyond. That's what you have to do. And the main policy instrument for that over the course of the next decade is freeing up more spectrum. That's the main thing you need to do. Is make certain that all these carriers have enough spectrum to be able to do that. And then when you get rid of this termination access problem, either by regulating it out of existence as a profit center, or by, better yet, going to bill and keep, then it's in the interests of the carriers to reorient their business plan, optimizing the use of that spectrum to do as much as you possibly can to support as many services as you possibly can over that broadband. So those are my priorities. I think they're not much different from the last time we had a transition. The only thing that's happened since then, which is really important, 5 years ago or 6 years ago, when the fast transition occurred, I could safely say, don't worry, Mexico, the rest of Latin America is struggling equally to come up with the right set of institutions to make this all happen. I can't say that now. Gradually, some big changes are happening out there in the countries. You're going to hear more about them later today. So, 6 years ago, it was okay to wait, struggle, drag your feet. Not now. Thank you.